Today's episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast is presented by our friends at Compassion International. FillTheStadium.com is the website. It's the end of the year, right? We're into December now, and so many of us are trying to think, okay, where can I give my time, my talent, and my treasure? And a lot of that has to do with your treasure, right? And giving back and helping someone who's in need. Well, let Compassion International be the place. Let FillTheStadium.com be the website that you check out, and let these kids who have been stuck in poverty-stricken situations, really bad situations across the world, especially during this pandemic, let those kids be who you help during this time of year with Compassion International. They're the most trusted child development ministry in the world. They're standing in the gap for 70,000 kids who are in desperate need of help because of the pandemic. Check out FillTheStadium.com to donate today. FillTheStadium.com.
This is Sports Spectrum, the intersection of sports and faith, where we bring Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
And welcome to the show. I am Jason. This is Sports Spectrum. We are the intersection of sports and faith. You can check out our website, sportspectrum.com. If you're looking for some gift ideas for this holiday season, sportspectrum.com is the place to go. You can order our magazine. Our quarterly magazine makes a great gift in time for Christmas. If you want to get our new magazine right now with Monty Williams from the Phoenix Suns on the cover, order today so you can get it in time for Christmas at sportspectrum.com. It's $18 for a whole year. That's it. $18, so it makes a great gift. We also have this brand new 52-week devotional, Sports Spectrum Interviews. It's about professional athletes and their stories of faith in sports. So it's a 52-week devotional. It's 120 pages or so, and it makes a great stocking stuffer. So if you're looking to get something for your kids, something for your sports-loving, Jesus-following friend or family member, the Increase 52-week devotional is also a great gift idea for the holidays. Again, they're all available at sportspectrum.com. Click the magazine icon or click that little store icon, and you can order the 52-week devotional or the Sports Spectrum magazine. It makes a great gift available right now at sportspectrum.com. Got a great conversation today with Andre Wadsworth. Now, if you're an NFL fan or a football fan from the 90s, you probably remember Andre Wadsworth. He was a stud at Florida State, national championship member with the Seminoles, and an All-American defensive end. In 1997, he had 16 sacks. He was a finalist for the Lombardi Award. He was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year and a first-team All ACC member. He was regarded in 1998 as the number one prospect in the draft. This was a draft that had Peyton Manning and Randy Moss and Charles Woodson, all Hall of Famers. Andre Wadsworth was the number one prospect, and he was selected third overall that year to the Arizona Cardinals, had a good rookie season, but then injuries just took their toll on Andre Wadsworth. He had 18 different surgeries in his career, which finally ended after 2007 with the New York Jets. But he is now a pastor, and wait till you hear how the church that he pastors right now started when he was still in college at Florida State. Take a listen to Andre Wadsworth, a fantastic conversation right now on Sports Spectrum. Andre, welcome to Sports Spectrum. How are you, sir?
Good. I'm enjoying the lovely weather here in Scottsdale.
Mm-hmm. You're talking to a guy who's in Connecticut with, cold weather here basically now. It's not even on the horizon anymore. So I once you went to Scottsdale, you got me jealous already as we start this conversation.
Yes.
It's the best weather. I remember being in Scottsdale, actually meeting you, and we talked about this beforehand, so I gave you a little bit of a heads up, but I was there covering the Super Bowl with ESPN, Seahawks, Patriots, that Super Bowl, maybe the most memorable ending to a Super Bowl ever. But I was there that week covering the game, and I came in a little early because the Pro Bowl was there that week as well. And I said, I got to find a church. And people pointed me to your church at Impact in Scottsdale. And I ended up there. I met Pastor Travis, and he introduces me to you. He's like, this guy played in the NFL, tall, 6'4", 200+ pound, defensive end. And I'm like, who is that? He said, Andre Wadsworth. I'm like, I remember Andre Wadsworth. So I'm guessing you don't remember our connection, but I do know that you have a connection with Sports Spectrum. Like, you've been aware of our ministry for many years, right?
Yeah, I think I even had an article years back. I can't remember, but I think I did.
Yeah.
During that time, maybe that or ESPN magazine, but I'm pretty sure Sports Spectrum, because I actually, would read several of the articles when I was in college. I think it started in college, my freshman year, around 1993. But just loved the magazine and, hearing about other athletes' faith, and it was good and refreshing to hear that. So that's the reason why the magazine caught my eye and enjoyed reading the articles.
No, that's great. I was so impressed. I remember when I met you with just how far and where God had brought you to in church. And, the church was amazing too. Multi-ethnic, very diverse, gospel centered, which I loved. And I'm just curious, like, what brought you to Impact and kind of the role that you have now? You're senior executive pastor. So tell us about the role that it entails and kind of what brought you to Impact.
Well, it was a God thing. So when I got drafted with the Arizona Cardinals, 1998, God put on my heart to start a Bible study. We were doing a Bible study in college. It was me, a guy named Peter Boulware, played for the Ravens, and then also a guy that played on a basketball team named Ron Miller for Florida State. And so we held like a Bible study, us three, but it kept on growing, and we had a lot of student athletes going when we were there, and we had a tight group of knit of friends and college athletes, student athletes, and just was awesome. So I wanted to see the same thing happen with lives being changed. So I started a Bible study. I remember inviting guys from the team, from Pat Tillman to Eric Swan to Simeon Rice, Jameer Miller, and then maybe about 7 guys came the first time. I think we had one guy commit his life to the Lord that first night. And then I would fly guys in. Daryl Green actually preached a couple of messages. AC Green came in. A guy named John Blue played hockey. And a guy named Adam Burke played hockey as well.
Yeah.
So I knew a lot of professional guys, and I remember Shane Doan used to come in the early stages.
Sure.
So I'd fly different speakers in, either were previous athletes, current athletes, and cater food, and it kept on growing. And by like the 3rd or 4th year, I had 150 people come into my house.
That's church, right?
And so we said, let's start this church. And so there was a guy that everybody really liked from Nashville. His name was Troy Johnson. He was a Motown. He signed with Motown and RCA Records as a Christian recording artist. He was first in the secular realm. And we started a church basically around 2002, 2003. But I was still on and off playing because I had all my injuries, but still focusing on sports, but having this Bible study / church. And, we started, from our house, and we were going to the gym I was rehabbing at. Then we were having Sunday services at the gym. And then we found a office suite area that we rented out, and it just kept on growing. And so we actually started 7 churches out of that Bible study to become a church. And every time we'd get to a certain size, 300, 400, 500 would start a church. And, a guy named Darius Holland played for Denver Broncos. He got saved, and we ended up starting 2 churches in Denver. And a guy named Brian Schwartz became the pastor of one, and Darius Holland became a pastor of one. And then a good friend of mine, still a best friend, He's a Muslim, was a Muslim,
Mm.
and his name was Amir Kazemi. He got saved at the church. He was a big businessman. I call him the Willy Wonka of Mexico City, because even though he's Persian, he owns his business in Mexico City, and he sells to all the major stores, chocolate and candy.
Right.
And his life got changed. And then we started flying to Mexico City, doing a Bible study at his warehouse with over 100 employees or so. And now he has a church well over 1,000 in a bull ring in Mexico City, one outside the city called Chalco, and then inside the city in Mexico City, he has a church there as well. Him and his wife and 3 kids. And so we kept on doing it. Then the pastor I started with decided to move to start a church in California. So he did, but I didn't. I'm more of the business guy and the seed planter. And so I always helped with all the business stuff of the organization. That's what I went to school for. I led a bunch of Bible studies of men, but my forte is I prefer to be in the background. So people think that's funny because you played professional sports. You played in front of, 80, 90,000 people. But that's not my personality. My personality, I knew my role from the beginning. If I had to do it, I'll do it. I'll do a great job, the best, but it's just not what I love to do. I prefer to be in the background and watch it grow and help be the engine of the cog to let it go, to watch it grow. So Pastor Travis, he called the church, and he was already the Phoenix Suns chaplain, and he was just intrigued by the church. And he said, and I told the previous pastor, say, we should have this guy come speak. And so we brought him in, and he really connected with the congregation, and we had him preach a couple more times. And little did I know that the other pastor that I started church with wanted to move to California, and he saw his opportunity where a guy can come in, and Pastor Travis says, hey, he accepted the offer, but he wanted to make sure that I stay on board of the church here. I wasn't going anywhere because, I started the church, so I wasn't going anywhere. So, but he wanted me to be on full time. And so since then it's been 11 years, and we've exploded, in the last 11 years. And here we are with Impact Church, in Scottsdale, Arizona. We have quite a few professional athletes, current and retired, all the way from UFC to NBA to NFL to baseball. So we have had tennis, WNBA. So we got a good gambit of it, but our congregation and our culture here has been just a blessing. And it's just been a good environment for people to worship, have a connection, and continue to grow their faith in Jesus.
Wow, that's an amazing story. Yeah, and that's how it's still going, right? I mean, it's just such a great story.
To answer this in short, I never saw myself in the position. I saw myself playing 15 years, going to 10 Pro Bowls, and being in the Hall of Fame and sharing my faith. But I didn't know I was going to have 18 surgeries, 16 on my knees, and 2 torn Achilles tendons. So God has a different plan.
Well, yeah, and it's perfect, right? I mean, that's the hard part is, our plans versus God's plans. I want to go back to that Bible study that you started, because in college, you're in your late teens, early 20s, whatever it was. Takes a lot for players to lead a Bible study at a young age like that. Usually, and maybe usually there's a chaplain or other people, but you started this thing, it sounds like, with a couple other players.
Well, Ron Miller was a little bit older than us.
Okay.
He was graduating from FSU as FSU basketball. He played with Charlie Ward, Sam Cassell, Bob Sura during that time when FSU basketball is doing really well still. But, you had just great athletes on the team. So he led, but we were current athletes that were so I would say both Peter and I were pretty much well known on campus, because of we were in the heyday, and we were the two, along with some other strong players. But I go 3rd pick, he goes 4th pick of the draft. So
Yeah.
It helps give credence or notoriety. People want to say, hey, what's Andre and Pete doing? They're doing a Bible study. Let's go check it out, that kind of a thing. So I think that's what helps for it. But to be quite frank, both Peter and I were just nervous. We were very shy. We're both pretty shy.
Yeah.
But we were strong in our faith, but we were very shy. I remember we used to take beta blockers when we had to go speak, so we don't sweat armpit our shirts out.
Yeah.
And so we were nervous. So it wasn't that we were such bold in our speaking, but we were definitely bold in our action.
But you said yes to doing that,
Yes.
which that's,
yes.
When you're scared and you're nervous and you're not sure, you don't want to do this, a lot of people would just shy away from that. It sounds like you were saying yes, recognizing the platform and the opportunity, even back then, to tell people about Christ.
Yeah. And, when I look back at it, God placed so many good people there at that time to help us, not just Ron Miller, but, the chaplain there now in Florida State, is Clint Purvis. He's been over 30 years, the chaplain. I'm still great friends with him. And he was just an outstanding role model and encourager of all things, was Clint Purvis. And so you had from Ron Miller to Clint Purvis, and of course, the late Coach Bobby Bowden. And so when you have people to look up to, and especially Bobby Bowden, that lived this life, it was a little bit easier to step out, even though you're still stepping out amongst your peers. But then your peers' leaders were strong men of faith. From our weight room coach, Coach Van Hallinger. It's just, we had a good atmosphere to help cultivate, even in the midst of being a little bit different.
You brought up Coach Bowden. When you think of faith in sports and Jesus and what this show is about, the first person that comes to many people's minds, including mine, is Coach Bowden. I had an opportunity to meet him back in 2014 at ESPN, and he was exactly like he's been described as and talked about for the last 2 decades, including recently with his passing. Tell me about Coach Bowden.
I would say 5 decades with him.
5 decades. That's right, Andre.
No,
about your interaction with him, maybe the first time you met him, and kind of hit the impact, clearly the large impact that he's had on your life.
I'll tell you, I remember I'm coming from a Christian high school, Florida Christian high school, with great coaches from, Scott Doan to Coach Octavio Delagrana, Coach Arnold. Coach D is actually one of the bench coaches for the Miami Heat right now. He was my basketball coach. And then a football coach was Coach Arnold and Coach Doan. They're all still in my life. I see him. When I do chapel at the Suns, I see him and he comes to the chapel. So it's just a small thing. But Coach Bowden, coming from a small Christian school and going to a big university, and the first meeting that he has, he kicks all the media out and he has just the players and the coaches. And he talks to us like his son. He says, hey, you guys are my sons, and I can't expect you to do everything I asked you to do, but it would be a disservice if I don't tell you these things. And the first thing he says, I don't want you to have sex before marriage. I don't want you to have alcohol in your dorms. And he would say, hey, we have a Sunday. I give you Sunday mornings off because I want you to find a place of worship. And it wasn't mandatory, but we took a bus to a Catholic church, and pretty much all predominantly Black church or charismatic church, and then we went to a Baptist church. And he would take the whole team and said, you guys can pick one of these places if you like, and to expose us to. And that was unbelievable and very impressionable, because you don't know what to expect. I grew up in this environment in a school, my whole life. And then I get to college where it's, it's a secular university, and I have my head coach is just, starting where I left off.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. And so, it was just an amazing atmosphere Coach put me into, and he was the real deal. We were, still spoke every now and then. Actually, before I found out that he was diagnosed, I was praying with not coach, but Clint Purvis, the chaplain. He was actually going over to his house, and a guy named Corey Simon, who's a believer too, was on the team, played for the Eagles, first round draft choice as well. Says, hey, we're all on the phone, and he said, yeah, coach wasn't feeling well. Clint's going over there, and just to see what's going on, because he usually made his workouts to walk to the mailbox and back, and a couple times a day.
Mm-hmm.
And he was having a tough time just walking to the fridge. So I said, so Clint says, I'm going over there. I said, well, hey, let's pray for him right now. And so right before he walked into, Coach Bowden's house, we prayed for Coach Bowden. I tell him, I said hi. And then literally a week later, that's when it was found out he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and it was terminal. And so we had no idea at the time when he was walking in that door, but we found out a week later. So it just shows you, 23, 24 years removed from the program when he was there. But I had him do a charity event out here, flew him in town. We stayed friends, and because it's bigger than football. It's bigger than sports.
Yeah.
It's about legacy. It's about your family. It's about instilling the faith, and he understood that. And so he wasn't just my coach, but he was my brother and father in Christ. He was a father figure in Christ and a good mentor. So that's what I could say about Coach Bowden.
Andre Wadsworth is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. The number 3 overall pick in 1998. And I remember that 98 team because I grew up a Dallas Cowboys fan. And you guys upset us at Texas Stadium, and I wasn't really happy. That was kind of
that game.
Yes, and that was the end of the Cowboys dynasty in many ways with Troy Aikman. That was his last playoff game. Same for a couple other guys. So at Texas Stadium, and just to think about that team, but for you personally, coming into the NFL, having a good first year, as a lot of expectations are on your shoulders, and obviously a lot of pressure, and coming into the pros versus college. What was that like for you adjusting? Because you talked about all the surgeries, and obviously the career didn't end up the way you hoped, but what was that like kind of coming into the league and trying to adjust? And you talked about being a Christian in college. So what was that like adapting to that in the NFL?
I guess my expectations into where I was, I guess coming from a small Christian school, I didn't have I wasn't a blue chipper. I walked on, earned a scholarship, and ended up starting 4 years we won a national championship. So my expectation, I knew it was God from the get-go. So I always consider myself a little bit of an oddball because I never fit into the pro sports or celebrity quote unquote lifestyle, I would say, because I didn't go to the NFL draft and they wanted me to, I turned down probably over $100,000 worth of signing autographs that whole week.
Wow.
I stayed with my family, and they thought I was crazy, for doing stuff.
Yeah.
So the only thing I remember that was tough for me, it wasn't the craziness where people knocking on your door, following you, or girls or anything. The strange thing for me was I wish I would have started the Bible study earlier. I didn't start it till the 9th or 10th game into the season, my freshman year, my rookie year, because I felt like I needed to lead the team in sacks. I led them in tackles, defensive line at that time, but I feel like people had, just like when I was in college, I had to be a force, not just the highest paid guy on the team at the time. And so that was the only weirdest thing decision-wise, was knowing my spot of when to start the Bible study. But overall, I never really fit in, and I still don't to this day for some reason. I have a lot of professional athlete friends and guys that I've played with or against and different sports. But I don't know. I always knew the bigger perspective of it was always about Jesus and being an example and knowing when the opportunity to speak to people, encourage people. And I never force it. It just happens when it's a part of your life, it's easy to talk about. And so, I've had a lot of opportunities to speak to other people from, Mick Fleetwood from Fleetwood Mac, or Jamie Foxx, or whoever. I've had an opportunity to share my faith or encourage somebody in faith. So I would say that was it. It's kind of weird, but I would say that's all was important. I love the game. I love athleticism. I love competition. That's still never changed to me. Even to this day, I probably said if UFC was probably big when I was coming up, I probably would have did that, because I love UFC. Because it's true, like, to me, like, what's inside of you, what can you get yourself better, that kind of. People say, oh, it's a brutal sport. No, it's not. It's a beautiful sport. It's just straight competition, and I like that kind of aspect of it. So I hope that answered your question.
It did. What's interesting to me is, it sounds like you're just not impressed with athletes or celebrities or anybody, and I have to imagine that kind of helps you in carrying over to being a pastor and being in church, because you said it, like, a lot of players and other people, former players, people that are probably well known, go to your church. And I remember talking to many quarterbacks, many NFL players about, including Matt Hasselbeck recently, about going in as when he was playing. I'm like, how were you able to plug yourself into a local church as a current player when everybody knows who you are? Like, how can you go to church when you know that there might be people looking for autographs or pictures, as weird as that sounds, at a church? How do you kind of handle that and steward that with the players that come, the people that come that might be well known to your church, and still allow them to have a church experience and not your typical experience when they're always getting, bombarded with autograph requests or pictures?
Well, Pastor Travis and I both, and from day one when I started back as a home, we were very protective about that, a place that people can come worship. So I think culturally, people know that here, and it hasn't changed one bit. And it continued, regardless if we're 5,000 on a Sunday. People know not to bother Cam Johnson or Jordan Hicks, or now Zach Ertz is here, and guys that are here, not because this is where they worship. And sometimes, and not only that, we've always had big guys here. And so in some of the times they don't recognize the guy. They see a big guy regardless, and they probably think, oh, maybe he played sport or didn't play sports. And so they almost all blend in a little bit, because everyone's, has a big physique. And so that plays into it as well. But, just to say, I would say that I'm not impressed. I am impressed in the standpoint of this. Anybody, it doesn't matter if you're a CEO or somebody doing anything at a high level. I'm very impressed in the standpoint of people doing well at their craft, no matter what it is. So I'll say that, but I'm not impressed of what are you doing it for? Right. That's what I'm saying.
The celebrity side of it.
I know family is bigger. I know someone's health and life and the way their well-being is bigger, because regardless of whoever it is, you got problems the same. You might not have the same, maybe financial problems or the same, but they have problems.
Oh yeah.
They struggle with identity. They struggle with relationships. They struggle with their kids. They struggle with their faith. They struggle with depression. They struggle with the ups and downs and hurts. And, they might be a little bit tougher skinned because, people, oh, Andre Wadsworth, he stinks, he did this, but they only saying that based off of what they know of when you played or anything, but they don't know what you're about or anything like that. And I think that's where I understand and they understand. And so we have that atmosphere, so.
That's good. Yeah, that's what I meant by being impressed. Certainly. Obviously, you're always impressed when you meet a professional, to me anyways, a professional athlete, just because it's the highest level
professional
competition.
It doesn't matter.
Just a professional. Was it hard for you to transition out? Because you talked about it. Sometimes it was hard. I mean, you're a high draft pick in the last 3 years. Yeah. Yes.
I would say it was actually longer. I retired in 7 because I had one little stint. I never stopped until 2007 after all my surgeries. And I had a little bit with the Jets, and I spent right before the day of before the season started. But I
Mm.
was with him for basically the whole off season since they got from all the way there. But the struggle with it, I wouldn't say I struggled. It's weird. The reason why I say that is two things. Like my dad passing away, I knew he would pass away. And so that was a very tough thing because he was a big role model in my
Sure.
life. But I knew and it prepared. So you go through a grieving phase. With professional sports, especially football, you know it can be over. And no matter what, a torn ACL or a career ending, you don't know what's going to happen. So you do your best. I ate right. I was 6% body fat. I don't drink. I don't smoke.
Mm.
And, I had avascular narcosis, a similar thing that Bo Jackson had in his knee. I had it in his hip. I had in my knees, and I didn't know it. And so it wasn't hard in the sense of grieving that, but it was hard in the sense of I don't get to do what I love to do and to see the potential where I could have went with it, or 10 Pro Bowls or whatever that. So that was tough. But the transition, God made it great in the standpoint of other business ventures and obviously the ministry, because this church is quote unquote, not saved my life, but sustained it and filled it with so much more,
Right.
that I can never imagine. The staff here, the people that I've had to minister, the people that I've walked with for the last 20 years, that have stayed and watched this thing grow and pray. And, my mentor, Pastor Jacob Aranza out of Lafayette, Louisiana, was a Saints pastor. The Pelicans. He's been in my life since I was 18, and he's still my mentor. Him and his wife Michelle. They've just been such a big blessing to me and everything. So I would say I probably had maybe a couple days crying over it, maybe in the hospital and surgery, but that was it. That was pretty much it. And I grieved that process well. And it wasn't like, I know it was never in depression. I probably had moments, but never in a depressive state.
So you mentioned UFC. Do you watch the Cardinals? Are you still an NFL guy? Are you sitting on the couch on a Sunday after church?
Man, I love football. I love sports. I just love UFC. If you give me a choice, maybe because it's less crowd, because I still don't like big crowds.
Mm-hmm.
So going in a game, if I go, I'd rather just go on the field, and maybe I'm spoiled in that way. Most events, if it's a big event, I don't want to sit in the stands. I'd rather be in the locker room or on the field, and so thus I don't go to too many of them.
Sure, you stay at home and watch them on the couch, right?
Exactly right. But I would go to ringside UFC. Those, but no, I watch the Cardinals and I root for them, and I do some alumni stuff with them. Not as much as I should, but I do some alumni stuff with them.
That's good. Last question here, Andre Wadsworth. I'm really curious to see what your answer is. God teaches us something new every day. He's brought you along on an amazing journey here. What's he teaching you though right now? What's he showing you? What's he teaching you in the sort of phase of life where he has you in today?
Okay. This is a loaded question.
Okay.
Like you want me to, okay, so it's probably going to be about 4 or 5 minutes. You sure you're ready?
Let's go.
Okay. God is faithful. It was the toughest thing I've ever went through my life, and it was about 2.5 years ago. I got a divorce, and it's unforeseen that I would ever get a divorce, because I didn't disqualify myself by any means, not financially or relationally or anything like that. It was something that I never thought would happen, because I, did everything that I could possibly do that I think was right, being a loving husband, faithful father, and all those different things. And I would say out of all the things, from sports to, losing a brother, losing a sister, losing my dad, I would say the unexpected, the enemy will always come and attack you with the unexpected. And, sometimes people that are in ministry and sports have the regular downfalls, let it be, uh, women or lust or money or fame or improprieties that way. Those things were never a struggle for me. Um, I'm human, but they never were a struggle for me. But I never thought I would get a divorce because I was like, okay, I do this, I do that, and never those things with that. So I understand that God is faithful, even in the midst of the things that come and attack if you stay true. And what he's taught me in the last 2.5 years, no matter what, if you're rooted in his word and rooted in everything, it will end up making you stronger. And that was the only time in my whole life questioning, from everything I went through, that I questioned God, because it rocked me so bad. But coming on the other side and saying that, man, if I wouldn't have had this support and I wouldn't have had this life of where I had my mentors and the people over the relationships and the foundation that I built, and I didn't isolate myself. And sometimes people isolate as being an athlete or doing those things, or you're embarrassed or whatever. But man, when God puts something around you, he clothes you with the best people, from Pastor Travis, the church staff, the church congregation, my mentors, people that love me. And God is just so faithful. And so what I have to say is this: he's just teaching me, no matter what the circumstances is, God is always faithful, even through the hardest things you never seen coming. Because I felt like I had good vision and I could see things coming. I definitely didn't see that, but God was faithful in the midst of that, even though.
Andre, thanks so much. Thanks for sharing your story here on Sports Spectrum. And we'll have to look up that article. You said that we did an article on you a while ago. I'm going to go find that in the archives and see if I can dig it out. But will you
look it up? I think I did. I hope so. I think so.
I'm sure we did. And I have all the articles or all the old magazines, and we can dig them up and take a look. But if I get that, I'll send it to you. But thanks for being here, man. Thanks for being so transparent and sharing your story. I know it's going to help a lot of people.
Thank you.
And many thanks to Andre Wadsworth for joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. That last answer, I did not know was coming. And that was about as transparent an answer as I've heard, especially with what he's walking through right now, a couple years removed from divorce. So just appreciate Andre for his whole story, really. Just the idea of starting a Bible study that led to a church plant that now has this incredibly, for lack of a better word, impacting church in Scottsdale with Impact Church, and just such a heart for Jesus and serving others. I just love talking to Andre. We could have gone another hour easily. He's got a great story, overcoming 18 surgeries to now be doing ministry. And even his ministry is sports ministry, right? Because he's in the locker room with the Suns doing chapel and helping out with some of the other teams and having some of the guys from the Arizona Cardinals come into his church. So pretty cool to see what's going on at Impact Church, and definitely with Andre Wadsworth. Loved his story. We had his pastor, Travis Hearn, on a couple weeks ago on the podcast as well, hearing his story. So Impact Church is doing some great things in the sports and faith area. And again, thankful to have him here on the show today. Thankful to you as well. Thanks for tuning in. Just want to remind you, if you're thinking about Christmas, you're thinking about a holiday gift, go to sportspectrum.com and you can order our magazine. It's only $18 for a full 1-year subscription. It's only $30 if you want a 2-year subscription, but you can get it right there at sportspectrum.com. Makes a great gift. Great idea for a gift for a young person who you want to introduce Jesus to, who might love sports. Great idea for somebody that you know loves sports and loves Jesus in your family. Maybe you have a friend. Monty Williams from the Phoenix Suns, speaking of Phoenix in Arizona, is on the cover of our newest edition of the magazine, our holiday edition, our winter edition, if you will. So there's an idea for you. We also got that other idea I was telling you about earlier in the beginning of the show, 52-week devotional. It's called the Increase 52-week devotional, 52 stories of professional athletes and how they're living a life of faith for Christ And all of those stories in the book stem from conversations that took place on Sports Spectrum's podcast. So it's pretty cool when you think about these conversations and how they turn into now a book form, and who that could reach with somebody reading this 52-week devotional. So it makes a great gift idea, a great stocking stuffer. You can order it on Amazon right now. Get your copy, or you can go to theincrease.com. That's the new website to order this devotional, theincrease.com, and you'll also find some pretty cool resources at that website too, our sister company, The Increase, and theincrease.com. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time right here on Sports Spectrum. Have a great rest of your day. Tune in next time.